Hello, we are re-releasing this special Remembrance Day or Veterans Day episode for November the 11th, 2020. This was first released in April 2019 for ANZAC Day in Australia, but Remembrance Day or Armistice Day or Veterans Day is marked on November 11th in the US, Canada, the UK, France, Belgium, Poland and beyond. So here we go.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history.
Hello.
Welcome to Dad and me love history.
Today we are looking at wars and how countries have a special day each year when they remember the people who died in them. We've got recordings that we made on Remembrance Day when we lived in Hong Kong and at an ANZAC service here in Australia. Different countries call their day different things, like Veterans Day on November 11th.
That's America!
Other places call it Armistice Day, or Remembrance Sunday, that's the Sunday that's nearest to November 11th.
That's the UK!
And other places, like France and Belgium, all of these places have parades where veterans march. Veterans means people who used to be in the Army or Navy or Air Force. Do you know why November 11th is chosen as the date to remember people who died in wars?
Was it the day World War I ended?
Yes, that's right. That's when they signed the armistice or surrender. So November 11th, 1918, just over 100 years ago, 101 years ago, is when the First World War ended. And it actually was signed at 11 a.m. So it was the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month.
We love history. We love history, baby. We love history. Did you know in World War I, dogs were used to carry messages up and down the trenches where soldiers lived and fought?
Many countries all have many of the same things on their special day of remembrance. Many wear poppies, have parades, have a minute's silence, and a bugler will play the last post. That comes before the minute's silence. And the rouse, that comes at the end of the minute's silence. So, James, did you recognise that tune?
Yeah, it was from Assembly.
Before the First World War, the last post was the bugle call that called an end to each day's activity. So when the army was out doing their training, they're practising, when they heard that sound, the last post tune, they'd have to come in. The last post is also played today at military funerals, and is played at parades and services like ANZAC Day and Remembrance Day. But it's not all about November 11th. It's different for different countries. Veterans Day in Norway is May the 8th, the anniversary of the day World War II ended in Europe. Do you know Norway only started having a Veterans Day in 2011?
Did you know World War I was the first war where tanks and aeroplanes were used? The Britons invented tanks and called them land ships at first.
And at a special place in Belgium called Ypres, a place that was in the middle of the fighting in World War I, there were 3 massive battles of Ypres, each one lasting months. There's a huge concrete arch there today called the Menin Gate. Inscribed on this arch are the names of 55,000 men from Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand and others on their side, whose bodies were never found. You can imagine there are hundreds of thousands more whose bodies were found who died in that area. Those bodies, those 55,000, are still missing. There at the Menin Gate, they don't just play the last post and have a minute's silence on one day per year, like November 11th. They do it every day.
Every day?
Every single day. At 8 o'clock in the evening, every night, no matter how bad the weather is, freezing cold, sometimes heavy rains, snowing, ice, doesn't matter. They've been doing it every day for almost 100 years, since not long after the First World War, to pay respects and remember what people sacrificed. So every evening, people start arriving an hour early, then the traffic is stopped by police, because there's a road that goes through this massive gate, Menin Gate. The buglers arrive, the last post is played, then there's a minute's silence and people lay down wreaths on the ground. So wreaths are like circles or rings of flowers, in this case mainly poppy flowers.
Did you know, while the men were fighting the First World War, 1 million women did the jobs the men had been doing before the war. The women would work with TNT explosives. The women, they were called canaries because the TNT turned their skin yellow.
5, 8, 10,
And here in Australia they also remember their war dead. Their big day is ANZAC Day. It's a special public holiday on the 25th of April every year. Do you have any idea what ANZAC means?
I think it's got something to do with only Australia because, like, Australia with an A.
Yeah, we've only been in Australia a short time. James has done one term at school here. But you're right, the A does stand for Australia. The N and the Z?
New Zealand.
Yeah, so it's the Australia and New Zealand Army Corps. Think of corps as kind of like regiment or group. So it's for Australia and New Zealand, not just Army actually, but armed forces, Navy and Air Force as well. There's a special event that happened during the First World War on the 25th of April 1915. And that's why the 25th of April today is their special day, public holiday, when they remember what happened in wars. And this was in April 1915. And it's not a big victory, the way most countries celebrate them winning something. It's the complete opposite. A big defeat for the side who really remembers this day today. It's when Britain and Australian and New Zealand and French troops, so the Allies working together, they made an attack by sea, landing the army from boats onto the shores of Turkey. So Turkey was on Germany and Austria's side, Austria-Hungary's side in the First World War, and Turkey's at the very southern edge of Europe. So Turkey wins this massive battle, killing hundreds of thousands on the Allied side and on the Turkish side as well. For Australia and New Zealand, they remember it because it was the first time they had lost thousands of people in one battle. And the population, the number of people living in Australia and New Zealand back then was not very high. So there were 26,000 Australian casualties. Casualties means seriously injured or killed in the battle. And around 8,000 New Zealand casualties. And that was a big number for small countries. So we went along to Lindisfarne Anglican College to hear an assembly here in Australia where students took us through what ANZAC Day is all about.
Here are some highlights.
In a moment, we will stand as some of our cadets process to the stage. Flowers have traditionally been laid on graves and memorials in memory of the dead. Today, each of our cadets will process and lay a wreath of rosemary, symbolising remembrance. I will then read the Ode of Remembrance, which will be followed by the playing of the last post, a minute's silence, and then the rouse.
5, 8, bell, turn.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
Did you know Sidney Lewis was just 12 years old when he lied about his age and joined the army during World War I in August 1915? He fought in some big battles and received 2 medals, but he was later sent home after his mum sent his birth certificate to the government and demanded that they would send him home. When he turned 16, he joined the army again and fought in the last few months of the war. And here is a recording we made in Hong Kong.
Yeah, at the Remembrance Sunday service outside by a memorial statue near Hong Kong Harbour. There were lots of people in military uniforms and lots of people wearing poppies. And first we speak to Sergeant Kelvin Fawcett. Hello, James and I are at the Cenotaph in Hong Kong for Remembrance Day service for Dad and Me Love History. And we're here with Kelvin, who's got a selection of war medals.
Can you tell us about your medals?
Sure, no problem. Well, first of all, I served in the Royal Engineers for 24 years. This medal on the left, this is the Northern Ireland Medal. I was there from 1995 to 97. This next one is the Bosnia Medal. I was there in 1997. The next one is Macedonia and Kosovo. Okay, it's the same medal for both operational tours, which is why I'm wearing a little number 2. Okay, the next one is the Iraq Medal. I was there in 2005-2006. The next 2 are Jubilee medals, so for the Queen's Jubilee. And the last one is what we call the Accumulative Service Medal, which means I've spent so long on operational tours.
Thank you very much.
There, is that Ryan's sister?
Yeah, you're right, that is. That's your buddy's sister. To ask her afterwards. I guess her mum or dad are in or have been in the armed forces. I guess that now that Hong Kong's part of China, that we won't hear the British national anthem today. See who's walking up on the far side now, what they're wearing?
Kilts.
So fighting to defend Hong Kong 75 years ago, there were regiments from Canada, from India, and from Britain, as well as from Hong Kong. And one of the ones from Britain was the Royal Scots. So there would have been bagpipes around with those guys, that's for sure. So James and I can see representatives from the Navy, dressed in white there, and from the Army in light green in the middle of those three men there, and then in blue from the Royal Air Force, from the Air Force. And it's again the blue in front of us here is Air Force blue. We can also see cadets, like the girls there. So that's sort of like young trainees. And we can see veterans from different wars. We've already spoken to someone from the Iraq War, and we can see Chinese veterans sat down here from World War II, from the Hong Kong Defence Volunteers. So James, do you know why they use a poppy as a symbol for war?
No.
It's because during the First World War, a lot of the fighting took place in fields, and a lot of those fields had poppies in them, at least before the war and even more after the war. And you can go there today in France and Belgium, where a lot of the fighting took place, and there's fields of poppies, the red flower. So because the First World War was the first big world war, they decided after that to use the poppy as the symbol, because it's in those fields that so many people got killed, and where the poppies now grow, and they've used that symbol ever since.
We love history, baby. We love history.
Yes, but the poppy was really made famous by a Canadian doctor, Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, during the First World War. He was inspired by the sight of poppies, the red flowers growing in the fields where the battles took place in northern France and Belgium. So McCrae wrote a now famous poem called In Flanders Fields. Flanders was the area of Belgium he was in, and you'll hear the word larks, that's a type of bird. And when you hear the line scarce heard amid the guns, that means they couldn't hear the birds because of the noise of the guns.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row. They mark our places, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below.
After the First World War, the poppy was adopted as a symbol of remembrance. So that earlier recording was from Hong Kong, where Remembrance Sunday is the nearest Sunday to November 11th each year.
Back in Australia, we interviewed an Australian Army Major.
Yes, we'll end today's special pod by hearing from Major Matina Jewell.
Thanks for joining us today.
Send us your comments on Instagram
And Twitter.
and Facebook. Yes, this is our last episode for this season, but tell us what questions from history you would like us to answer next season.
So we'll leave you with Major Matina.
Hello, Major Matina Jewell. I'm Dad,
And I'm James.
and welcome to Dad and Me.
Love history.
Hi, how you going?
Good. Thanks for joining us today. So in our podcast, we aim to show how history can be fun and interesting, and that history is for everyone. And we've had about 25,000 downloads around the world. So, James.
Could you tell us about your medals, please?
Yeah, I can tell you about my medals. I'm very fortunate to have earned eight medals over my 15-year career in the Australian Army. So the ones that are the most important to me are two medals that I have. There's one that I'm not wearing today, but there's a second of those from the Republic of Lebanon. I'm the only Australian to actually have these two specific medals from Lebanon. One's for their Lebanese War Medal, which is this one, which is for acts of bravery on the battlefield. And the other medal that I'm not formally permitted to wear is their Wounded in Combat. And that's because Australia, we don't actually currently have a medal to honour our wounded. This is our war service medal, so I've been awarded that one twice. That's why there's those two bars. The Afghanistan medal, our Australian service medal, and I've been also awarded that for two separate different missions in the Solomon Islands. The long service medal, our service medal, and this is the United Nations medal with a numeral 2, which means that I've served for more than 12 months on a UN mission. So I served in Syria and Lebanon in a UN peacekeeping force.
Why should kids care about history of wars?
Well, I think it's important that kids, not only kids, but also all adults, take an interest in history, and particularly our military history and the history of the wars that have shaped and guided nations into the current form that they are today. I think particularly for Australia, our ANZAC spirit was born out of the battles that our soldiers fought in World War I. And that spirit has helped guide many people now to emulate those same behaviours that were born on the battlefield of bravery, sacrifice, teammates, loyalty, that are positive attributes to take from even something that was such as horrific and such great loss as what happened from World War I, that we've made something positive out of that tragic environment. The fact that in Australia that our most significant date to remember is the day that we actually suffered our greatest losses on the battlefield, on the 25th of April at Gallipoli. Many other nations around the world celebrate their greatest victories, but I think in Australia it's really important to point out that we really respect the fact that war is the failure of diplomacy, and we should always fight for peace, and that's why we actually commemorate such great loss rather than a victory.
Do you know what diplomacy means? Imagine if you're in the playground and two kids have an argument and they talk at first to try and sort out the argument, and we all hope that's the end of it, it's just talking. But sometimes if talking fails, that's diplomacy. If talking fails, then it could end up in a playground fight. Not very often in your school. Not ever, I hope.
Yeah.
So
good analogy on how to look at it, that it's sort of that arguments and then can become sort of more physical, to sort of pushing and shoving of countries that are violating humanitarian rights often in other parts of the world.
Well, that's a really powerful way of thinking about it, that war is usually a failure, but that we should still commemorate it and have respect for the fallen and also try to learn from it, right?
That's right. And as a veteran, I want to make sure those lessons are learnt so that we prevent sending our sons and daughters off to war and face the horrors that our forebearers have gone through.
And you've been involved, obviously, in conflicts, particularly in the Middle East and in UN peacekeeping situations. So James has just got a very easy question here.
Why do people go to war?
Well, that's a good question, James. We send our people off to war when diplomacy has failed, when our politicians have not been able to find more peaceful resolutions to situations. And often, our Australian servicemen and women are actually going in order to defend the rights of people who are in horrific situations in other parts of the world who don't have the ability to defend for themselves.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us today on Dad and Me, and we wish you all the best.
Thanks for having me.
Dad and me love a whole lot of history. We could be the greatest team that the world has ever seen. Dad and me love a whole lot of history. Here are some questions to see if you were listening.
What does ANZAC, ANZAC, stand for?
Number 2. Why is November 11th an important date for remembering people from wars?
Number 3. What happened at Gallipoli in Turkey in World War I?
Number 4. What is the last post?
Number 5. Which country is the Menin Gate in?
Number 6. What colour are poppies?
Number 7. Who wrote the poem In Flanders Fields?
Number 8. Why is it important to remember people who died in war? Blue, 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 blah.
Recording, but obviously.
Did you know? No. No, wait, who's doing the did you knows? Chicken, 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 chicken. Dun 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 dun.
You were there, so I don't need to play the highlights now, but I've cut it down. Excellent. Good. Well done.
Boom, shakalaka, laka, boom. Australian Army Major.
Cool. That's a wrap, but we don't have many outtakes. What should we do?
That good?
Good's not the word I would use.